people's tear ducts, ear canals, and even directly in their brains. And to make things even creepier, patients report they are able to feel the movement of the botfly larvae beneath their skin. Taking the 7th spot is the Japanese Asian giant hornet. While only responsible for a mere 50 deaths per year, a paltry body count compared to some of our champions, this insect is definitely one of the deadliest on Earth. Growing up to 3 inches long, about the size of your thumb, this wasp boasts an incredible flesh-eating toxin containing no less than 8 individual poisons. It aims this toxin at the eyes of its target and, like all wasps, can sting as many times as it cares to. 2 dozen of these warriors can easily slay an entire hive of honeybees. That's 20 wasps versus 20 to 30,000 bees, and the wasps win every time. As if all this wasn't enough, this breed of wasps is really attracted to chemicals present in human sweat. And don't think you can outrun them either. They fly more than 50 miles per day at top speed without tiring. Stepping in at number 6 is the driver ant. There is nothing inherently terrifying about the driver ant. It isn't huge, it doesn't have mandibles half the size of its body, and the only poison it has is mild formic acid used to gradually dissolve organic material. So what makes these ants so scary? Well, it's the fact that their colonies are monstrously huge, over 20 million strong or more, stretching for miles and miles. Driver ant colonies are so big that small children and elderly are at risk of being literally asphyxiated to death by the swarm. Driver ant colonies are so big that they can completely strip every scrap of organic material from the body of an adult human in less than 4 hours. Even elephants run away from these deadly insects. If caught in their path, thousands of animals fall victim to these bugs each time a swarm of driver ants leaves its nest. Number 5. The kissing bug. So-called kissing bugs got their name from their distinctive mouth parts, which resemble tiny tubes designed to suck on things. Most of these species feed on plant sap, but other species feed on blood instead. The ones that feed on humans are notorious for biting people on their lips while asleep, in fact. About an inch long, these bugs look and act like giant ticks. The reason they appear on this list is that they are primarily responsible for spreading a condition called Chagas disease through their feeding, a condition responsible for killing 10 to 15,000 people annually, and unlike most diseases has unfortunately been trending upwards in recent years. This insidious condition can present no initial symptoms at all, only to have horrible chronic problems such as heart disease and intestinal deformation occur up to 30 years after the initial infection. Trailing the top 3 is number 4, the tsetse fly. You have probably heard of the tsetse fly before, but not by name. You're much more likely to be familiar with the so-called sleeping sickness caused by its bite, which has been featured to great comedic effects in films, television, and in books. The reality of this disease is a lot less amusing. Left untreated, the condition is inevitably fatal to humans. For decades, sleeping sickness has been responsible for hundreds of thousands of deaths on an annual basis, sometimes as many as 300 to 400,000 deaths per year. Thankfully, we have made huge strides this century in treating and diagnosing this condition. In 2009, the world fell below 10,000 reported cases in a calendar year for the first time in almost a century. Despite these impressive improvements, approximately 70 million people still remain at risk for infection on an annual basis, a significant chunk of the Earth's population. At number 3, we have the flea. At one point in time, a strong case could have been made for the flea to occupy the top spot on this list. In the 14th century, the Black Plague ravaged Europe and was responsible for up to 200 million deaths over the next several centuries until it died out in the 1600s. About 1/3 of the populace fell victim to this disease, which was spread throughout Europe by the fleas present on the backs of the rats, which infested every city, village and town, dotting the countryside. While today they are more of a nuisance than anything else, the legacy of the Black Plague seemed like more than enough to secure them a spot in the top 3. At number 2, we have the locust. The world's second deadliest insect has no capacity to directly harm a human in any way, so how can locusts possibly be considered deadly? The phrase collateral damage comes to mind. A locust swarm can consist of up to 80 million individual insects and cover an area of almost 500 square miles in diameter. Within the affected area, over 400 million pounds of eatable crops are destroyed each day, as every insect eats its own weight in grain and plant material. To put this in perspective, a subsistence diet capable of sustaining a human life for a year requires about 500 pounds of grain. Locusts are partially responsible for famines which affect the lives of millions of people on an annual basis, making them extremely deadly, if in a slightly roundabout fashion. Some historians even credit the Great Locust Plague of 1915 as one of the primary causes of the downfall of the Ottoman Empire. At the top of this list is number 1, the humble mosquito. Believe it or not, the world's deadliest insect happens to be one of the most common ones as well. In fact, this insect is so common that you likely personally encountered them thousands of times before. You can find them anywhere on Earth except Antarctica. These insects aren't dangerous because of the bite, poison or sting, but rather because of the diseases they carry and spread. To illustrate this, take a look at malaria, just one of many diseases the mosquito carries. Despite the availability of modern medical treatment, this incurable disease still claims 1 million lives per year and infects between 300 to 500 million more people. No other insect can lay claim to anything approaching that level of carnage, making the mosquito the undisputed deadliest insect on Earth.
Braxis presents 10 horrifying things found living inside a human body. Number 10. Plants in lungs. A Massachusetts resident experienced a persistent, nagging cough. Ronan Speeden went to the hospital for treatment of what he thought was a tumor. X-rays revealed that Speeden had a 2-inch-long pea plant growing in his lung. In 2009, when 28-year-old Russian Artyom Sidorkin described the severe chest pain he was experiencing, doctors feared cancer. When they removed a portion of Sidorkin's lung, they found a surprise. The surgery revealed a small fir tree, 2 inches long. The tree had sprouted from a seed the man inhaled in the woods on Army training. Number 9. Fish in lungs. In India, a 12-year-old boy complained to a doctor about breathing problems. Undergoing emergency surgery for his low blood oxygen level, the 45-minute operation revealed a 3.5-inch long, 9-centimeter fish in one of Annalbarella's lungs. The boy admitted that he and other local kids had been playing a popular game called Swallow a Live Fish. Instead of the fish going down his esophagus, it went down the windpipe into his left lung. Number 8. Spider in stomach. A 21-year-old tourist to Bali ended his visit on a disturbing note. Australian Dylan Thomas awoke on a Saturday to discover a 2-inch red trail on his torso rising from his stomach. Later in the day, the trail had traveled 2 or 3 more inches up his body. When he saw doctors on Sunday, they diagnosed the problem as an insect bite and gave him a cream for it. On Monday morning, it was blistering. A dermatologist was concerned that his problem was more serious. Doctors operated and removed a small spider from his body. The Bali International Medical Center medical staff determined the spider, only the size of a match head, had burrowed into Thomas through a scar from his appendix removal. Some Perth, Australia scientists now believe it might have been a parasitic mite instead of a spider. Number 7. Maggots in the ear. One elderly 92-year-old woman was treated for 57 maggots living in her ear. The medics believed a fly must have crawled in and laid eggs which successfully hatched. A man in India was even more unfortunate. When he arrived at a hospital complaining of ear pain, the doctor found hundreds of maggot larvae feeding on his flesh. If left untreated, they would have fatally burrowed into his brain. England's Rochelle Harris returned home from a holiday in Peru. Soon she was hearing scratching sounds in her head, pains in her face, and excruciating headaches. Doctors assumed it was a minor ear infection until they discovered many maggots deep inside her ear. They were New World Army screwworm fly larvae, and the doctors had difficulty removing them because as they attempted to reach them, the maggots retreated further into her head, chewing a hole in her ear canal. Number 6. Brain worm. When Rosemary Alvarez of Arizona experienced blurred vision and numbness, both she and her doctor suspected a brain tumor. There was no brain tumor, but rather than being good news, what she really had was bad news. During surgery, the doctor found that instead of a brain tumor, Alvarez had a tapeworm burrowed into her brainstem. Tapeworms are actually common hitchhikers in humans, but their favorite habitat is the intestinal tract. The horrifying factor in Alvarez's case was that the only way a tapeworm could get to her brain was through ingesting human fecal matter. Since the grandmother obviously wasn't involved in some fetish, she had to have eaten something prepared by someone's unwashed hands. Number 5. Bugs in scalp. In 2007, Aaron Dallas of Colorado had incredibly itchy scalp, which he treated for weeks with ointments, salves, and special shampoos, with no relief. As more time passed, he says he could feel his scalp moving and hear something. Then he began to experience debilitating pain. Doctors discovered that botfly larvae had been implanted in his scalp, probably by a mosquito on a trip he had taken to Belize that year. Undergoing surgery, doctors cleaned out an open pit on Dallas's scalp that was full of bugs. Each of them was approximately half the size of a penny. Number 4. Giant hairball. In Kyrgyzstan, doctors were consulted because severely malnourished Hyperi alexiva couldn't keep down any food or drink. When they operated on the 18-year-old, they were horrified to discover a giant 10-pound hairball in her stomach. Hyperi was suffering from trichophagia, a compulsive disorder causing a person to eat their own and other strands of hair. Eventually, the accumulated hairball that forms develops a tail which gets into the intestine, known as Rapunzel syndrome. Number 3. Magnets. Small children swallow inappropriate things. Such was the case with 8-year-old Haley of Indiana, who ate something that looked like candy. She was admitted to the hospital suffering from mysterious stomach pains. X-rays revealed the girl had swallowed over 30 magnets and small chunks of metal. The magnets still behaved like magnets, locking together regardless of whether they were in the same internal organ or not. Doctors say Haley was lucky to have survived. Number 2. Your twin. Sanju Bhagat of India was ridiculed as a child for his abnormally big abdomen. In fact, he had looked pregnant his entire life. He was taken to the hospital one night for severe pain and shortness of breath. As doctors operated to remove what they thought was a tumor, they discovered Bhagat's parasitic twin instead. The twin had been there since they were in the uterus together, living parasitically off of him. Only partly formed, the twin had developed hands, feet, genitalia, and hair. Termed fetus in situ, there have been less than 90 cases recorded in medical history. Number 1. Cutlery. When Margaret Dahlman of the Netherlands went to a hospital in crippling pain from her stomach, her x-rays revealed what looked like a large squid. Operating on the 52-year-old woman, doctors discovered over 78 forks and spoons. She had swallowed each of them one at a time. While we may be confused about how and why someone does this, there is actually a name for the mysterious compulsion to eat items that are not food. Pica. Subscribe for more.